Heaven gifted Xia Nanfei with an IQ of 140, but it also prepared a tumor for him. The summer he met Yuan Man and felt his heart race for the first time was also the summer his life began to unravel. Beep, beep. Late at night, any sound becomes amplified to an unbearable degree. And this one had been going on intermittently for over an hour. Is this ever going to stop? Yuan Man sat up abruptly, ruffled her hair in frustration, and, still fuming, reached for her bed frame's ultimate weapon, a noise disruptor, thrusting it up toward the ceiling. The tool lived up to its name, sending resounding thuds echoing upward. The noise above stopped. Yuan Man snorted in satisfaction, turned off the device, and went back to bed. But just as she drifted off, the beeping started again. Are you kidding me? What kind of maniac keeps this up at midnight? Frustrated beyond endurance, Yuan Man threw on some clothes and stormed upstairs. By the third ring of the doorbell, the occupant finally opened the door. It was a young man, tall, long-legged, with fair skin. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that he was only wearing a loosely draped robe, the belt undone, exposing a swath of a toned chest. Yuan Man flushed scarlet. It took her a while to find her voice. What are you trying to pull some stunt in the middle of the night? The man, seemingly realizing the issue, slammed the door shut. When he reappeared, he was properly dressed, though his hair still dripped water. I just got back from work and took a shower, he said awkwardly, then added, Is there something I can help you with? Yuan Man cut straight to the point. Are you Xia Nanfei? I'm Yuan Man, your downstairs neighbor. Xia Nanfei smiled faintly. I know. I've seen your profile photo in the group chat. Yuan Man grew angrier. Then why are you playing dumb? I don't care if you've overworked yourself into a daze. Can't you be a little more considerate of others? If you're obsessed with marbles and can't live without them, could you at least choose a better time to play? I'm not sure I understand, Xia Nanfei said, genuinely puzzled. Ms. Yuan, as I've told you before, I live alone. No one here is playing marbles. But I can clearly hear the sound of marbles. In Yuan Man's mind, people make mistakes, but getting caught red-handed and still refusing to admit it? That was next-level shamelessness. All right, how about this? Xia Nanfei suggested, still calm in contrast to Yuan Man's fiery temper. Let's go to your place and listen together. We can figure out what's going on. How does that sound? Though Yuan Man was straightforward by nature, she wasn't someone who lost her temper easily. Unless she really couldn't take it anymore. A week ago, she'd just moved into the neighborhood. The first night was peaceful enough. But starting from the second, for 3 nights straight, she heard the sound of marbles dropping from upstairs. Hoping to foster good neighborly relations, Yuan Man addressed the issue in the community group chat. Mr. Xia, could you kindly ask the kids in your household not to play marbles late at night? I'm a tour guide and often have to lead groups. I really need proper rest. Thank you. She thought her message was courteous, a model of neighborly patience. But Xia Nanfei outright denied everything. Ms. Yuan, you must be mistaken, he replied. I'm not married, there are no kids in my home, and no one here plays marbles. I'm sorry, but I really did hear it, Yuan Man insisted. If he continued to deny it, she had evidence. She'd recorded the sound. There's no one playing marbles, Xia Nanfei maintained, though he softened slightly. It might have been the sound of me using the bathroom or dropping something on the floor. I apologize for disturbing your rest and will try to be more mindful in the future. That sounded more like it. The following days saw a heat wave. With the air conditioner on, Yuan Man slept soundly through the nights and didn't hear a thing from upstairs. See? Just admit your mistake. Was that so hard? She muttered to herself, but didn't dwell on it. Her schedule was packed, and she dragged her luggage from one group tour to the next. But on the very night she returned home, looking forward to a good rest, the marble noise came back. And you're still saying no one's playing? Yuan Man dragged Xia Nanfei to her bedroom and pointed at the ceiling. Do you hear it now? If it's not from your place, whose is it? It's coming from my place, all right, Xia Nanfei said, tilting his head to listen for a moment. But I live alone. If I'm here now, who's upstairs playing marbles? His words were deliberate, his tone tinged with an almost eerie calm. Yuan Man froze. Her face paled instantly. She'd just moved in and had no desire to become the protagonist of some paranormal drama. Seeing her expression, Xia Nanfei couldn't bear to tease her any longer. What I meant, he explained, is that it might not be someone tossing marbles, but rather the sound of small stones in the concrete shifting due to thermal expansion and contraction. According to some scientific journals, it's a natural phenomenon. What do you think, Ms. Yuan? The man leaned casually against the doorframe, smiling as he looked at her. She felt, right now, she just felt that a luxury apartment in Thompson Riviera was nothing. She could figuratively pick one up with her toes. If only she'd checked online earlier. But if it weren't for the fact that Xia Nanfeng wasn't home and she could still hear the sound, how would she even have thought about it? How about this? Yuan Man said, lowering her head and sneaking a glance at Xia Nanfeng. I'll treat you to dinner tomorrow. I really feel bad about it. Earlier, she had adamantly insisted in the group chat that it was someone playing marbles, and she'd even brought out her wall shaker tool as a countermeasure. Either way, she felt guilty. Forget it. I know you didn't mean to, Xia Nanfeng said, shaking his head. No way. Yuan Man's stubborn streak flared. I'm just like this. I like to address things face to face. If I'm at fault, I'll own up to it. So, dinner's on me. And so, the next evening, the two of them found themselves sitting together in the hot pot restaurant downstairs. Unlike Yuan Man, who constantly ran around as a tour guide, Xia Nanfeng was a programmer. At least, that's what he called himself. In truth, he had a graduate degree in computer science from the best university in the country, and, by the age of 29, had become a partner at an emerging tech company. Don't you get bored sitting in front of a computer all day? Yuan Man asked curiously. She had chosen to be a tour guide partly because of her near-obsessive love for travel, and partly because she'd never been able to sit still as a child. The idea of a 9-to-5 job confined to a cubicle was, to her, unimaginable. Not really, Xia Nanfeng said with a smile, as though he understood her point. As he helped Yuan Man scoop some duck blood into her pot, he patiently explained, if you only think of software development as a job, then yes, it might feel monotonous. But it's like solving math problems as a kid. Every time you overcome a technical challenge and see your work make other people's lives easier, the joy is immense. Besides, Xia Nanfeng added with a wink, his eyes sparkling, I don't spend all day in front of a computer. I like to travel, too. Back in Beijing, I explored all the nearby places. Then, when an opportunity came up to work in Sichuan, I thought, why not explore here, too? That's how I ended up here. Since they were only a few years apart and shared common interests, the two quickly became friends after that hot pot dinner. The following week, Yuan Man was leading a group tour to Juzhegu. When she learned that Xia Nanfeng had been in Jin City for months, but hadn't yet visited Juzhegu, she enthusiastically invited him to join. Don't worry, you're one of us. I won't charge you, she said, patting him on the shoulder generously. As it happened, Xia Nanfeng had just wrapped up a project and was in between tasks, so he readily agreed, but insisted on paying his share. This time, Yuan Man was leading a mid-range tour group of 16 people, including Xia Nanfeng. Since the drive would take all day, lunch was arranged at a rural family restaurant along the way. 2 tables were set up, with 10 dishes per table. It was a standard group meal, not overly lavish, but with fish, meat, vegetables, and soup. It was a balanced spread. Everyone was eating when, suddenly, a loud clink broke the air. The elderly lady sitting across from Xia Nanfeng had slammed her porcelain soup spoon onto the table. What is this? Just this? And you dare charge us nearly 2,000 yuan? Shame on you, the old lady shouted in a piercing voice. Exactly. Not a single dish here is something my son can eat. Are you trying to starve the child all day? A woman who looked like the old lady's daughter-in-law stood up and added, I'm going to talk to the guide. What's going on? Yuan Man poked her head in. Let me tell you, guide, the old lady began, pointing at the table with spit flying everywhere. Making money is one thing, but don't be so greedy. Look at this food. That fish, is it supposed to be that spicy? My grandson doesn't eat spicy food. And those meatballs? They're mostly starch. Not a single decent dish here. My grandson won't eat anything. What are you going to do about it? Yuan Man glanced at the table. The food seemed fine, certainly better than the boxed lunches she usually had while working. Auntie, why don't we step outside to talk? She suggested, trying to pull the old lady away. It wasn't a big deal, but Yuan Man was worried that if the old lady spat on the table, no one else would want to eat anymore. Talk outside? Why should I? The old lady jerked her arm free. I just want to know, what's the plan if my grandson goes hungry till dinner? It's a group meal. If you want something tailored to your grandson's taste, you should order it yourself, someone muttered under their breath. The old lady exploded. Fearing an all-out quarrel, Yuan Man quickly interjected, Auntie, group meals are never perfect. Given our travel conditions, this is the best we can do. If the child wants something specific, I can go to the nearby convenience store and buy it for him. How about that? A lousy convenience store? What decent food could they possibly have? The old lady shot back. Yuan Man felt a headache coming on. Here we go again, someone treating a group tour like a royal entourage. Hey there, little guy. Xia Nanfeng stepped in at that moment, crouching down beside the boy. He held a bowl containing a few pieces of fish, some sausage, and vegetables. Uncle has a little trick, he said, lowering his voice and putting on a mysterious air. If you mix these with rice, it'll taste surprisingly amazing. Want to have a contest with Uncle to see who can make the tastiest mix. The little boy hesitated, looking at Xia Nanfei, and finally nodded. Xia Nanfei smiled, and Yuan Man let out a sigh of relief. Mix it? What mix? This stuff isn't even edible. The elderly woman was having none of it and pulled the boy away. You expect my grandson to eat this? Exactly. This is neglecting the future of our nation, she added, throwing accusations around as the daughter-in-law followed her out the door. Sorry about this. The kid has a weak constitution, and they're just being cautious, the boy's father muttered apologetically. Once the family had left, the other diners began chatting amongst themselves. Fortunately, no one blamed Yuan Man. Still, she couldn't shake her worry. If they were already complaining about the group meal and refusing to listen to explanations, what other issues would arise over the next 3 days of the trip? You're like a mom and dad rolled into one. Must be tough, huh? A familiar male voice broke through her thoughts as she stood by the restaurant door. Turning around, she saw Xia Nanfei standing there with the sunlight framing him like a halo, making him look radiant. Hey, you know what? Yuan Man blinked playfully. You're pretty good with kids. You'll make a great dad someday. Huh. Xia Nanfei was caught off guard by her comment and froze, his ears turning slightly red. Not that it's relevant. I don't even have a girlfriend yet, he said, trying to brush it off. Oh, that's easy. Yuan Man declared confidently, patting her chest. Leave it to me. You don't know how imbalanced the dating market is these days. It's either feast or famine. Someone like you, tall, smart, and well-off, would be a hot commodity. Tall, smart, and well-off. Xia Nanfei unconsciously touched his tone dabs. Yeah. High looks, high IQ, high income. For a second there, I thought you meant high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and high blood sugar, Xia Nanfei joked. Both of them burst into laughter. It turned out Yuan Man's concerns were valid. Half an hour later, as the group prepared to leave, they realized 4 people were missing, the elderly woman and her family. They're not even answering their phones. What are they trying to pull? Yuan Man's frustration peaked as she redialed their number 6 or 7 times, only to be sent straight to voicemail. Her temper flared. I'll help you look for them, Xia Nanfei offered, pointing to the few roadside eateries nearby. They can't have gone far. The family hadn't gone far. They were standing outside the kitchen of a small restaurant, waiting for someone to steam an egg custard for the boy. Auntie, I announced the departure time before lunch. If you weren't planning to come back, why didn't you let me know? I've called you so many times, and now the whole bus is waiting for you. Yuan Man said sharply, her tone firing off like rapid bullets. Why should I report everything to you? The elderly woman raised her voice, refusing to back down. Who do you think you are? God. Exactly. Do you think we want to spend extra money eating separately? If the group meal wasn't so bad, we wouldn't need to do this. Her daughter-in-law chimed in, pointing at the restaurant. And now you're blaming us for making everyone wait? Isn't this your fault as a guide? How is this my fault? Yuan Man was ready to argue, but Xia Nanfei stepped in to mediate. Let's not argue about this now. Auntie, can you leave with us now? His voice was gentle, trying to de-escalate the tension. The elderly woman crossed her arms. Can't you see? The egg custard's still steaming. We're not going anywhere. Okay, how about this? Xia Nanfei offered calmly. We'll wait for 10 minutes. Once it's ready, I'll bring it onto the bus for you. Does that work? Bring it onto the bus? That's not going to work. Eating on the bus makes a mess. The elderly woman shot back. That's it. Yuan Man cut in decisively. You can eat whatever you want and leave whenever you want. I'll refund your money. The bus fare and lunch are on me. There's a bus here that goes back to Jincheng. You can take that and find another tour group. With that, she pulled out her phone and waved it at the daughter-in-law. Your payment code. Stunned, the daughter-in-law glanced at her husband. Even the elderly woman looked at her son in confusion. It's all a misunderstanding. We're here to have a good time. No need to make a big deal out of a small issue. The man said awkwardly, rushing the server to check on the egg custard while urging his family to gather their things and head back to the bus. Didn't know you were so impressive, Xia Nanfei whispered as they walked back, his tone carrying a hint of admiration. Of course, Yuan Man replied, puffing out her chest with pride. I've been leading tours for 3 years. If I can't handle something like this, what's the point? Xia Nanfei looked at her. She held her head high, her eyes sparkling with determination, a little smug and a little adorable. Lowering his gaze, he felt a thud in his chest, the pounding so loud it almost drowned out the world around him. The trip to Jizhaegu was truly delightful. Xia Nanfei and Yuan Man walked through the murmuring streams, admired the 5-colored flower seas, and took countless playful photos together. But after returning, Xia Nanfei developed a peculiar habit. For instance, every time he stepped into an elevator, he couldn't help but hope Yuan Man would happen to be inside. Or when a colleague mentioned a newly opened restaurant, he would instinctively think that Yuan Man might like it. Xia Nanfei wasn't a child. He knew what this meant. Did you take a group out? When will you be back? He sent Yuan Man a message. Next weekend. Yuan Man replied. Great, let's have dinner then. I heard there's a new restaurant that's supposed to be really good. Haha, sure. Yuan Man added a cute emoji. Xia Nanfei had never known that just a few words from someone could stir so much anticipation. 3 days before Yuan Man was due back, Xia Nanfei bought a new outfit, a light blue t-shirt and beige trousers, looking fresh and clean. Carrying the shopping bag, he returned to the office, running into the general manager on the way. Mr. Xia, what's this? The manager raised a brow. Spring in the air? Spring? Perhaps. Xia Nanfei's eyes softened into a smile. But as they say, life is full of twists and turns. That afternoon, during a meeting, Xia Nanfei was explaining a technical plan when his vision suddenly blacked out. By the time he realized what had happened, he was already on the floor. Mr. Xia, gasps erupted in the conference room. Xia Nanfei clutched his head. It felt like something inside his brain had exploded. Everywhere ached, yet he couldn't pinpoint where exactly. Call an ambulance, he strained to shout, but his voice was faint. Somehow, deep inside, Xia Nanfei felt this wasn't just a random dizzy spell. It was like watching a skyscraper collapse, starting from the foundation. He could only stand by and watch, unable to stop it. Please call an ambulance, quickly, Xia Nanfei panted. He had fallen for someone but hadn't had the chance to tell her yet. Now, more than anything, Xia Nanfei hoped that this really was just a random dizzy spell, nothing more. Xia Nanfei stayed in the hospital for 2 days. During that time, he combed through numerous research papers, all on glioblastoma. Every finding pointed to the same conclusion: a tumor in his current location, at this stage, left little room for effective treatment. Can it be operated on? Xia Nanfei, unwilling to give up, pressed the attending physician. The doctor stayed silent for a while before shaking his head. It can't be fully removed, and there's a high chance he wouldn't make it off the operating table. The doctor didn't finish, but Xia Nanfei understood. He hadn't expected that along with his impressive IQ of 140, life had also gifted him a tumor. It was fair, he supposed. It just came too early. Perhaps it was his own fault. The occasional headaches, nausea, he had always brushed them off as common colds, treating them with over-the-counter meds. Xia Nanfei stared at his reflection in the mirror for a long time. If he had to leave, he wanted to take control of how his remaining time would be spent. Yuan Man had to return home for some family matters, which meant she had to cancel her dinner plans with Xia Nanfei. 2 weeks later, she returned to Jingcheng. Excitedly, she ran upstairs to his apartment only to find he wasn't there. "Where are you?" Yuan Man called, her voice full of cheer. "Tomorrow's my birthday. We've planned dinner and karaoke. You're coming, right?" "There'll be girls." "I might have to work late," Xia Nanfei replied in a low voice. The moment he heard her voice, his eyes stung with tears. He had always been excellent and diligent, believing that every challenge in life could be overcome with effort. But this time, he felt utterly wronged. He was only 29. He hadn't done anything wrong. "Work again?" Yuan Man sounded disappointed. "Can't you skip it? It's my 25th birthday." Maybe it was selfishness, or maybe he just wanted to leave a fleeting memory in her life. In the end, Xia Nanfei decided to go. By the time he arrived, the group had already moved to a karaoke room. "Have you eaten?" Yuan Man leaned in close and asked over the loud music, smiling brightly. "I have," Xia Nanfei replied with a smile. "I even saved this for you." She held up a box of flaky pancakes. "I remember you like these. Don't forget to take them home for breakfast." "Okay." "I knew it. Everyone else was done eating, but you insisted on ordering one more to go." Turns out it was for him. A friend teased Yuan Man. "Exactly, Yuan Man. You're so biased. You guys don't know her. She's a sucker for good looks," another friend chimed in. The group laughed and joked as some sang and others drank. The room was brimming with lively, youthful energy. Xia Nanfei clenched his fists, smiling at everyone. He was grateful to them for being part of Yuan Man's life, for being there to accompany her and care for her. "Who picked this song?" "What? Do we have a boomer here?" Someone pointed to the screen displaying In the Wind and Rain of Longing. "A boomer?" Yuan Man shot up, grabbing the mic. "This is a classic. You're just uncultured. But you can't sing it alone." At that, everyone turned to Xia Nanfei. He told her once that he loved old Hong Kong songs. She remembered. Thankfully, the dim lights concealed the sudden tears that slid down his face. "Let's sing together," he said, walking to her side. Just this once, he would be selfish just this once. Let this fleeting life leave the faintest mark in her memories. But apparently Yuan Man didn't think so. She had a little to drink, and her excitement made it impossible to hide her thoughts. Her gaze was fixed entirely on Xia Nanfei. To use a trendy phrase, her eyes seemed to glisten with unspoken longing. The crowd of friends cheered loudly, some even clapping and shouting, "Get together already." By the time the ruckus finally died down, it was already midnight, and Yuan Man was thoroughly drunk. Since Xia Nanfei hadn't been drinking, he needed to drive. He took on the task of getting Yuan Man home. Yuan Man sang random songs all the way back. When Xia Nanfei finally dragged her into her bedroom, she suddenly threw her arms around his neck. "Xia Nanfei, I like you. Do you like me?" she asked, tilting her head, her eyes shimmering like dewdrops. Xian Nanfei stiffened at her words. Her lips moved closer, and he could catch a faint scent of plum wine. "Well, do you like me or not?" "Just say it," she insisted, determined to get an answer. "I do." Xian Nanfei swallowed hard. "As a friend." "As a friend?" Yuan Man frowned. "No, I don't want your good person card." "It's not that," Xian Nanfei explained. "I really mean it. I'll always be your friend, protecting you, staying by your side. A boyfriend. A lifelong good friend." Yuan Man wasn't satisfied, sulking and fussing until she finally fell asleep. Xian Nanfei pulled up the blanket to cover her, restraining himself with great difficulty, and in the end, allowed himself one indulgence, a gentle kiss on her forehead. And that would be it. A lifelong friend, because he likely didn't have much life left. He turned off the lights and left the room. In the darkness, his tears flowed uncontrollably. The next day, Yuan Man woke up. The good news? Thanks to the vitamin C tablet Xian Nanfei had forced on her the night before, she didn't have a headache. The bad news? She hadn't blacked out either. She remembered her embarrassing behavior from the previous night all too clearly. Xian Nanfei found it odd. Although Yuan Man was at home, she seemed to have disappeared from his view entirely. Several times, he deliberately went downstairs with the trash, timing it with hers, only to find the elevator empty. He even strolled under the jacaranda tree she loved, but she was never there. It dawned on Xian Nanfei. Yuan Man was avoiding him. Aside from feeling a little heartbroken, this seemed like good news. It meant they could drift apart, just as he had hoped. He contacted a foreign specialist and sent over his medical records. The reply came quickly. His condition was beyond the reach of traditional treatments. However, there was a new experimental therapy. If Xian Nanfei was willing, they could arrange for him to try it. The catch? Without treatment, he had about a year left. If the treatment failed, his life could end at any moment. Xian Nanfei couldn't make up his mind. He needed to prepare his work, his family, everything. And Yuan Man, he wanted to see her a few more times before the disease disfigured him completely. In truth, Yuan Man wasn't entirely unwilling to see Xian Nanfei. She'd hear the sound of his door opening, as if waiting for something, only to hear it close again after a long pause. But that night had been too embarrassing. She'd confessed her feelings, only to be rejected. She had thought Xian Nanfei liked her too. She never expected it to turn out like that. A week later, Yuan Man's period arrived, forcing her to go downstairs to buy sanitary products. The person she'd been avoiding for a week suddenly appeared in the elevator. Xian Nanfei was dressed in a crisp white shirt and light gray trousers, exuding a polished, professional aura. Meanwhile, Yuan Man was disheveled, her forehead shiny with oil, clutching an unmentionable item in her hands. She wanted to die of embarrassment. "Not working today?" Xian Nanfei asked with a small smile. "I just ran into the concierge. She mentioned there have been break-ins in the nearby neighborhoods. One of the victims was a single woman living alone. Luckily, she wasn't home when it happened, so there were no injuries." As he spoke, Xian Nanfei frowned slightly. "Make sure to lock your doors and windows at home. Always check before opening the door if someone knocks." Xian Nanfei. Yuan Man stared at him for a few seconds. "Are you worried about me?" "Of course," Xian Nanfei paused. "Don't forget we're friends." "Friends, my foot," Yuan Man thought with a pout. The elevator arrived at Yuan Man's floor. She took 2 steps out, only to hear a soft gasp behind her. Yuan Man turned to see Xian Nanfei, who had looked fine just moments ago, now leaning against the elevator wall, pale-faced, with beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. "Xian Nanfei, what's wrong?" Yuan Man cried out, rushing back to support him. "I'm fine," Xian Nanfei forced a smile. But before that smile could form fully, his brows furrowed sharply, and his entire body began to tremble. Yuan Man didn't press for answers, quickly helping him out of the elevator and into her apartment. She placed him on her bed and frantically searched for painkillers. I'm okay now. After enduring a long time, the worst of the pain subsided, and Xia Nanfei finally opened his eyes. What's wrong with you? Where does it hurt? Yuan Man asked, her voice shaking with worry, as if he were made of glass and might shatter at any moment. Really, it's nothing. Xia Nanfei forced a light tone, pointing at his neck. It's just cervical spondylosis. It's common in our line of work and can occasionally compress nerves and affect blood flow to the brain. Oh, Yuan Man let out a breath of relief. Then, without thinking, she offered, I learned a bit of massage. Want me to help you? As soon as the words left her mouth, she froze. She was offering to massage a man. What if Xia Nanfei thought she had ulterior motives? Sure, but still, she had her reputation as a sweet, innocent girl to uphold. Luckily, Xia Nanfei didn't seem to overthink it. Sure, he said, flipping over onto a pillow. Just go easy on me. I'm scared of pain. A grown man afraid of pain? With Xia Nanfei facing away, Yuan Man felt her tension ease. She started teasing him instead. You must not have been spanked as a kid, huh? I was well-behaved and got good grades. Xia Nanfei played along. Why would I get spanked? Because you were the perfect kid parents used to compare us to, Yuan Man said, playfully shaking her fist. If I were one of those boys always being compared to you, you'd be the first person I'd beat up. Haha, so violent. Xia Nanfei chuckled into his pillow. Yuan Man laughed too. Well, it serves you right, hogging all the good qualities for yourself. After this little incident, Yuan Man managed to put her failed confession behind her. Later, the two of them met for meals a few more times, usually after Xia Nanfeng had scoped out good places to eat and waited for Yuan Man to return from her tour groups. They grew closer. Xia Nanfeng even bought feminine products for Yuan Man once, and she helped him sew a button back onto his shirt. But beyond that, there was no progress in their relationship. Yuan Man felt a bit discouraged. She'd never been the one to pursue someone before, and Xia Nanfeng's openness and straightforwardness made it hard for her to make a move. The next month, Yuan Man led a tour group to Zendukyo. Unfortunately, she caught a cold right before the trip. With the schedule locked in, she had no choice but to tough it out. Then, to her embarrassment, the experienced tour guide Yuan Man succumbed to altitude sickness before anyone else in the group. It's humiliating. My first time getting altitude sickness, and I can't even find a pharmacy at night. All because of this stupid cold. While inhaling oxygen, she posted about her ordeal on social media. Yuan Man fell asleep around 10 p.m., only to be woken by her phone ringing incessantly. Half asleep, she didn't answer, but soon she heard knocking at her door. Struggling to get up, she remembered Xia Nanfeng's advice. She pressed herself against the door and asked, "Who is it?" "It's me, Xia Nanfeng," a man's voice replied. Yuan Man froze for a moment, then quickly opened the door and threw herself into his arms. Xia Nanfeng hadn't expected such a reaction. Before he could lift the medicine in his hand, he found himself tightly embraced. "Xia Nanfeng, my head hurts," Yuan Man whimpered against his chest. "And I feel nauseous. You have no idea how awful it is." I brought you medicine. Take it and you'll feel better," Xia Nanfeng said, gently patting her back. "No, I'll just throw it up." "It's okay. Even if you throw up, you still need to take it. You won't get better otherwise." "Fine, but you have to get me some water." For some reason, illness seemed to make even the strongest people vulnerable. Yuan Man, who had always been the tough one, instinctively began to act coquettishly. "All right," Xia Nanfeng replied with a smile in his voice. Only then did Yuan Man obediently take the medicine and return to inhaling oxygen. "Xia Nanfeng, why are you here?" she finally asked after some time had passed. "You said you couldn't find any medicine," Xia Nanfeng said calmly. "I happen to have some at home." "How did you find me?" "If I wanted to, I'd find you." Yuan Man stared at Xia Nanfeng. For a long time she said nothing. Then, with a trace of grievance in her voice, she asked, "Xia Nanfeng, you obviously... Why can't we be together?" The words were humiliating to say, so she quickly turned over and buried herself under the blanket. What she didn't know was that behind her, someone was biting their lip, their eyes red with unshed tears. Xia Nanfeng sent an email to the overseas specialist, agreeing to undergo the experimental treatment and requesting arrangements to be made. The specialist reminded him once more that the worst-case scenario was that he might not survive the treatment process. "I understand. For the people I want to protect, I'm willing to take the risk," Xia Nanfeng replied. Yuan Man only found out about Xia Nanfeng's departure 2 days before he was scheduled to leave. "What kind of project requires you to go in person?" she asked, clearly unhappy. "I'm the lead developer. Others wouldn't understand the situation," Xia Nanfeng said. When will you be back?" Yuan Man asked, looking up at him. "If all goes well, a few months. If not," Xia Nanfeng's heart ached. "I might have to stay there long term." "Long term? How long?" "Perhaps forever." "Why? Are you reluctant to let me go?" Xia Nanfeng forced a smile, trying to change the subject. "Who's reluctant? I'm just worried that without you picking out places to eat, I'll miss out on so much good food." Yuan Man took the bait, her tone growing defensive. The day Xia Nanfeng left, he insisted that Yuan Man not see him off, but she showed up anyway. "You're not going to cry, are you? Don't. Otherwise, people will think I bullied you," he teased. "As if anything, I should be the one bullying you." Yuan Man raised her chin defiantly. "Besides, it's not like it's a life and death separation." "A life and death separation?" Xia Nanfeng froze for a moment before turning away. Yuan Man acted carefree. As soon as Xia Nanfeng passed through security and turned back, she was already walking away. He stood there, watching her green t-shirt fade into the crowd as though she were disappearing from his life. He raised his hand, tracing her silhouette in the air, trying to carve her image into his memory. If fate were kind enough to give him another chance, he would return and give her an answer. This time, he would be the one confessing. If fate were not so kind, then he had to remember her clearly, so that in their next life, he could meet her earlier and tell her, "I really like you, Yuan Man." The treatment was excruciating. Summer Nanfeng endured hair loss, constant vomiting, and bouts of fainting. But his tumor didn't shrink. This meant the experimental therapy wasn't working for him. "How much time do I have left?" Xia Nanfeng asked. The specialist regretfully shook his head. "About 6 months." That was enough. That night, Yuan Man had just finished her shower when she received a voice call from Xia Nanfeng. He said, "They have great research facilities here. I might not be coming back for now." "For now? How long is that?" Yuan Man asked, a bit disoriented. Xia Nanfeng steeled himself. "What I mean is, I've decided to develop my career here. You know, creating software that benefits humanity has always been my dream." "Oh." Yuan Man wanted to ask, "What about me? What about us?" But Xia Nanfeng had made it clear from the start, he liked her as a friend. So she had no grounds to argue or beg. That night, Yuan Man downed 12 bottles of beer by herself. Overwhelmed with bitterness, she called Xia Nanfeng, unsure if he even picked up, and cried into the phone. "You're the worst. You knew I liked you and you didn't like me back, but you still had to be so good to me. You're horrible, just horrible." There was silence on the other end. Then, a hoarse voice replied, "You're right. It's my fault. Why can't we be together? Tell me what's wrong with me. I'll change. I'll change anything you want." Yuan Man shouted, her voice cracking. "Yuan Man, you're perfect. You'll meet the best man someday. Someone who will love you with everything he has." "What about you? Why don't you love me?" "It's my fault." Eventually, Yuan Man cried herself to sleep. On the other end of the line, someone silently listened. When her breathing evened out, the man choked back his tears and whispered, "Yuan Man, don't hate me for too long, and don't forget me too soon, okay? I love you." After that, they still shared some daily moments, mostly through voice messages. never bringing up that night again. Yuan Man gradually accepted the fact that Summer Nanfei could only be a friend. Sometimes, she even jokingly asked if the girls abroad liked him. Summer Nanfei played along, saying that human aesthetic tastes were universal. By the 4th month, Summer Nanfei finally prepared a gift for Yuan Man. With the loss of taste and touch and the increasing pain, he also had a premonition that his time was running out. One day, Summer Nanfei was feeling particularly good, so he asked a nurse to help him apply some makeup and even wear a very realistic wig. He looked at himself in the mirror. Apart from being thinner, he thought he looked alright. He then called Yuan Man on a video call. At that moment, Yuan Man was organizing a bonfire party on the grassland, surrounded by people singing and dancing. Summer Nanfei, look at what you missed. Roasting lamb. Yuan Man pointed at the center of the crowd. The lamb on the grassland sizzles and oozes oil. Smells amazing. Come back quickly if you want to try it. Summer Nanfei smiled. I can't come back. You'll have to eat extra for me. As if you have the taste for it. Yuan Man, are you happy? Summer Nanfei asked. Of course, I'm happy. Yuan Man smiled, carefree. There's food, drinks, and fun. Living like a god. What's there not to be happy about? As long as you're happy. Summer Nanfei raised his voice. Yuan Man, you have to keep being happy, okay? At that moment, someone called out to Yuan Man, saying the lamb was ready. I'm going to eat now, I'll call you later. Yuan Man shouted. Okay. Summer Nanfei gazed deeply at her. He said, I'll wait for you. The next day, after Yuan Man had fun, she called him back, but he didn't pick up. He left a voice message, saying, in a meeting, how was it? Was the food good? Of course it was. Yuan Man replied proudly, I ate a few extra bites for you. You were virtually there. He laughed. From then on, they never had a video call again. Even voice calls stopped. She would send messages and he would reply. The replies were always warm and lighthearted, just like before. Yuan Man's life gradually brought new people into it. She would occasionally share her life, send happy pictures, or vent her frustrations to him. Summer Nanfei was like the best confidant, always there, always quick to respond, accompanying her through many lonely or happy moments. However, Yuan Man eventually fell in love. Her messages to him became less frequent. Later, when Yuan Man got married, she told Summer Nanfei. He couldn't come, but he sent her a generous red envelope. Yuan Man felt a little melancholic, blaming him for missing such an important moment in her life. But if Summer Nanfei had returned, she would still have treated him to roasted whole lamb. That had been their promise all along. 2 years later, Yuan Man gave birth to a daughter. Life was so busy that 24 hours a day wasn't enough, and she stopped messaging Summer Nanfei for a long time. He didn't message her either. It was as if they had both become names in each other's contact lists. It was like she never asked him late at night, "Why don't you love me?" And he had never kissed her secretly. Yuan Man's life remained blissful. Her husband loved her and their daughter with all his might, and she had even forgotten the pain of childbirth, thinking about having another child like him. One day, Yuan Man was moving to a bigger house. While packing, her daughter offered to help and came across a delicate gold bracelet. Yuan Man stared at it for a while before recalling that it was a gift Summer Nanfei had given her before leaving. She sent him a message, only to find that she was no longer on his friends list. Never mind, it had been too long without contact. Yuan Man thought. But she would never know that Summer Nanfei, who had once lived upstairs, warm and full of smiles, had long since stayed in that summer. He had loved her to the end. And so, he had developed an AI chat software for her, which accompanied her for 6 whole years. Until she no longer needed it.